Welcome to Recogs, the Inventory Success Podcast, where we discuss how the top operators source, manufacture, finance, and sell their inventory in order to create successful businesses. I'm your host, Mike Gelb. I'm the community manager here at Manufactured. Manufactured is the inventory success platform for consumer and SMB companies. We help brands with inventory financing, factoring, sourcing, manufacturing, reducing their COGS, and as well as distributing their products to new retail chains. Now, I know this is a free podcast, but that doesn't mean I don't have a favor to ask you. If you're enjoying this show, if you could please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening to this content, so you don't miss when the next episode is, that would be terrific. And if you could also leave us a review on the Apple Podcast app, that would be awesome. Now, we not only produce content devoted towards SMBs, but we also throw events to help foster community across the US. To subscribe to be in the know when we next throw an event, check in the show notes, go to manufactured.com/events. The link is also located in the show notes. Now, our guest today is Matt Weiss. Matt is the co-founder and CEO of Rind Snacks. Rind Snacks are snacks made from dried fruit. The secret ingredient in our craveable whole fruit snacks is not something we add, but something we don't, the rind in the fruit, the peel. So we discussed a little bit about the founding journey within Rind Snacks, how he was interested in building a brand around the fruit peel that wasn't kind of full of added sugar and all that nonsense. But we also discussed, it's pretty interesting, Matt also acquired a manufacturing facility too a few months ago. We talk about why he also vertically integrated Rind and also the opportunities that it presents owning manufacturing and why it also made sense for that particular category for manufacturing and maybe categories where it might not make sense as well to own your own manufacturing if you're a food and beverage brand. Really interesting conversation around manufacturing and also balancing being a brand, also being a manufacturer for other brands. Without further ado, here's Matt. Matt, thank you so much for joining me here today. How are you doing?
What's up, Mike? It's great to be back with you. I'm doing great. It's Friday afternoon in the summer. I still have some kids away at camp, so life is good and free for the moment.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you for joining me, especially on a Friday afternoon when you could be doing, I'm sure, other incredible things in the summer of New York, which I know it's such a great season. So talk to me a little about Rind. Tell us a little bit about the product itself, a little bit about the origin story, what was missing from the market in the world of dried fruit.
So, dried fruit's been around for thousands of years. We didn't invent the wheel here. What we have done is take a very non-innovative category and bring some energy and life to it by focusing on the part of the fruit that's most commonly overlooked and discarded, which is the rind, the peel. And for us, it is sort of the crown jewel of the fruit. It houses more fiber, more vitamins, more big, bright, flavor profiles. It's why people zest, citrus over baked goods to give it that added zing. But yet nobody was looking at the category as a snack and saying, we got to think differently than raisins and prunes. And I'm a snacker of dried fruit. It's easy. It's convenient. It has a long shelf life. And this is a product that I created that I enjoyed myself. So it was one of those, I was looking for a snack that had more excitement, but was missing. And that was sort of what started us on the journey.
When you figured out that, hey, people weren't actually maybe doing this in a CPG package format in the way that you wanted, that maybe had, tons of added sugar, or were using, or the actual base ingredient, the actual base wasn't the actual fruit that you thought was, quite interesting, or like you mentioned, raisins. A lot of people using raisins, for example. What was it starting out doing, kind of experimenting in your kitchen? Was it consulting as well with a chef or someone that kind of came from that background? What was like the start from that perspective?
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of tinkering with like a mandolin, which is like those slicers. I like to say if someone looked at my Amazon shopping cart in the summer of 2017, they might think someone was building something like terrifying in their apartment. It was like heavy duty commercial slicers, like, huge fans for like circulation and commercial grade dehydrators, and then like baby stuff. It was like very weird mix because I have 3 kids. But nevertheless, we didn't use fancy product developers because the product didn't really need it when we first started. It was almost less is more. It's our mantra that instead of having a secret ingredient, as something we add, it's what we don't subtract, the rind, that makes the product so special and unique. So it didn't require outside product development. It required a lot of like focus groups among family and friends to see, which rind related fruits translate really well when you remove the moisture and you can snack on them all day. And we went into more of a tart, tangy direction, which I think has really you've seen the market and the consumer preferences toward spice, savory, away from super sweet. And that feels like our thesis there was right. So that's sort of, how we started, but you were right to hit on something around this didn't exist in a packaged form on shelf. Dried mango has certainly come to light, and that's, become a big staple in a lot of pantries. But where this was found and where I did encounter really unique, bright dried fruits that had nothing added was at the farmer's market. And on a couple trips to the West Coast while I was still working in finance, I found any free time I had, I tried to run to a farmer's market. And there was one in Santa Monica, you've probably been to it, and all these Central Valley farmers would drive down and would have the most incredible fruits as a snack that were overripe and they weren't able to sell fresh. And that was just sort of, how could I not find all these amazing fruits in a snackable form anywhere but here? And they were selling like crazy. They couldn't keep these in, replenished fast enough. And so I wanted to figure out, could this be done at scale and why hadn't it?
So, Matt, this should have been your inspiration to move to LA to find inspiration of products to launch. All right, I'm trying to pull you out here. All right, trying to get the family to come out.
You know what? Shame on me. There's something to it, man. We have a good green market in Union Square, and Danny Meyer will speak to that. But boy, there's nothing like the bounty of California produce. It's the envy of the world.
Agreed. But I love visiting you in New York. So when you kind of discovered this and saw that there wasn't a packaged product, when did you realize that when you're experimenting and you're ordering all this equipment, all these things on Amazon, when did you realize how did you maybe figure out, okay, this is actually a product that tastes good? What does that even mean? And how do you think about testing and all that fun stuff in order to see if people would actually like it?
Yeah. Look, I think it's the start that stops most people. I think it might have been Don Shula who said that. And, I had taken this idea and pursued it as like a crazy weekend side project. I was dehydrating like 24/7 in my apartment. It was obviously unsustainable, but it was a lot of fun and it was a creative expression. And I would make these like Ziploc bags of various blends. Some would have dehydrated melon, for example, which I was really enjoying, these like almost fruit jerky of watermelon, cantaloupe, honeydew. And I was giving it out to friends and family, and they kept asking for more of it. And it was in like a Ziploc bag. It looked super shady, but it was this, very universal idea. It's fruit. We keep the rind on, so it has benefits. It helps fight food waste at the same time. It was just so elegantly simple. And when you start something and you get that feedback loop of positivity, you kind of just want to keep going. But I realized, doing it out of an apartment in New York City is not a way to scale a business. So what I did was I started to research as I was an analyst in finance for 20 years. So you just start putting together the mosaic of the players in an industry to understand how you go from an idea and then the raw material and then the co-man and then the certifications through to finished product. And so I put myself through that test from scratch. You got to start from somewhere.
Talk to me a little bit about when you realize, okay, people like this product, they keep asking for more, and how, when you realize, okay, I want to maybe test the waters and actually see if we can manufacture this properly. Not to say you weren't manufacturing properly in your home, but with a manufacturer. And how did you go about choosing the right manufacturer for you?
I think it all starts with really high quality inputs. This is what separates good products from great products, is sort of not compromising, certainly not in the beginning, around the most vibrant, beautiful fruit you can find, back to Central Valley, California. And what I did was I had been to the trade shows that were brand centric and were facing the CPG community externally, like an Expo West. But what I realized I needed to do was hit those trade shows that were supplier focused, right? Where brands were going to look for potential partners on equipment, on new product development, new capabilities, new ingredients. Those are called supply side shows. So it was at one of those shows that I met several different dried fruit dehydrators or manufacturers on the West Coast. And I went with my gut and the one that I felt was the highest quality, yet I could construct a model around that still allowed me to make an appropriate return. As you start to pencil this out, what could this be? So it started with an amazing dehydration partner, them taking a chance on me as much as I took a chance on them. We continue to grow with them, and they've become an indispensable partner to our business. And that was the beginning. I'll tell you, what's awesome about finding the first supplier is you are never done building that mosaic. You are always going to be asking questions and on to the next challenge. Once I identified the supplier of the raw material, I asked them and said, who do you recommend, if you do anybody, a potential co-manufacturer that's within close radius of the dehydration facility so we can keep down transit miles, etc. And they gave me two different folks. So one led to the other, and then you start to have the pieces of the puzzle fall into place.
Got it. So it started with like the raw dehydration and raw materials, and then it actually went into manufacturers. It's interesting when you were thinking as well about, because of course when you're just starting out, quantities, for example, can be a big deal, right? And of course, from a manufacturer's perspective, they want, of course, large quantities. They're incentivized for large quantities, as they should be. And of course, when you're a founder and you're just kind of getting started and maybe you're not even in retail yet, or maybe just a few stores, you still want that flexibility to have low minimum order quantities. At the same time, you're probably going to be paying higher prices for those minimum order quantities. How did you think about from what was kind of important, whether it was speed, whether it was unit economic price, or whether it was, actually being able to produce smaller quantities? What was kind of important for you when it came to the actual contract with the manufacturer?
What was important then is just as important now. And it starts with a relationship. You are building trust with a supplier that if you're right and they can keep up with your demand, you're both going to do great. But you're only as successful as, their capabilities. And therefore, it took a long time, I believe, and they had to see evidence that Rind was growing and buying in larger and larger quantities before they really started to lean in and allocate, because it's a perishable crop and they have to dehydrate and want to have visibility into the quantities that they're going to be reserving for certain customers. And we started out as a small fry, and we've now probably become one of the largest customers for this dehydration partner. But it required trust and partnership. So I look for relationship first. Is this a partner that has been around a long time, has a great track record? You do reference checks like you do anything, really. And what I love is generation family businesses that can scale in big bulk quantities. And there's been evidence of that before. And while it's a hard pill to swallow when you're really little to sort of take on that much inventory, you recognize that these minimum order quantities are something that we will grow into. And in the beginning, it's going to be imbalanced, and that's okay. But bringing a product to market that I could sell I knew the ultimate step that would determine viability. And I think everything else, your cost structure is going to be under optimized in year one. You just have to accept that. There's no way you're at scale. There's no way you can procure and be super efficient. And it started with a relationship, and they probably thought I was crazy. I kept showing up at all these conferences. I flew out to meet with them, and I was expressing this vision for a really big dried fruit snacking business. And it's been special that they've been with us and been part of the journey all this time, because it's sort of coming to fruition every day.
I'm also kind of curious, when you do have a new product that is quite different in the category, meaning the base is different. It's not raisins, for example. It's not prunes, or it's not even maybe mangoes, right? It is different, and as well as the flavor that you want, it's not actually a very sugary flavor that you're actually going for on the profile side. Of course, manufacturers are going to be very, very concerned about your sales, because obviously, they're producing these a custom product for you. It's your own product, obviously, and of course, then they want to drive you up. Was there any concern that, okay, this is such a new product that maybe this is just a little bit too outside the lines for us, or what was that kind of? How did those conversations go between you trying to do something pretty innovative and the manufacturer that also has to kind of agree to actually produce your products?
It wasn't as difficult a conversation around, the product and the potential market fit or acceptance of it. This was a company that they know the beauty of their product. They're one of the premium dehydrators of fruit in California, but they're a manufacturer. They're a dehydrator. They're not a marketing or a brand. So they would be like the farmer's market setup, and which they'd been doing for decades. And they knew how beloved dried persimmons were, as an example, or dried peaches were. But they never had. So I think they quickly understood, wow, here's somebody who sees the commercial opportunity that, as a dehydration expert, we haven't been able to pursue. So it wasn't a hard sell there. I think what was really cool was that, and I don't know that I could do this again, is as I'm thinking back, I don't think there was a contract. I don't think there was a contract on the first procurement, and I don't think there was a contract with the first co-man and the first co-man run, which is, it's crazy to say it, but that was sort of the strength of and the trust factor that I think we both had mutually. And it was just because I was incredibly dogged and kept pestering them to give me a chance. And I owe them a huge debt of gratitude for taking a chance on Rind in that first year.
That's awesome. That's great. How did you think as well about when you started to get into retail stores? How did you think about pricing your product as well for it? And because it was, somewhat a new category. I mean, yes and no, right? Because of course, dried fruit, it's been around for what seems like ever, right? And people consuming it. but at the same time, you're trying to doing something a little bit different when it comes to what it tastes like, the taste profile, and as well as what the base is. How did you think about it? And obviously, of course, you're using very high product inputs and ingredients. How did you think about overall the category, and as well as you pricing it?
Yeah, we thought about it in a couple ways. One was sort of product composition. So I should say the first three SKUs that we launched were blends, right? They married 2 to 3, sometimes 4 dried fruit ingredients in a bag together. That may sound very simplistic, but most dried fruits are single ingredient in on shelf. They are not a medley or a blend. And that was something that I wanted. I wanted sort of diversity of textures and flavors and tastes to make sure they had to harmonize in a bag. And I would learn the hard way. I was like, I had to learn about, something called moisture transfer, where like a overly, dehydrated fruit with a different moisture content and another one, you could get a bag of, something that tastes more orange or more apple because one of the fruit's more predominant. So we learned that the hard way, but eventually we harmonized around 3 different blends. And that was a value-added take on the category where you could find the constituent ingredients of a bag like behind me of strawberry, which is dried strawberries, dried pears, and dried apples. And you could have a retailer go back and say, I have these 3 ingredients, as a private label, each priced here. But when you come to them and say, we're creating a new snack and bringing a new customer to the aisle with a blended product, you get to sort of dictate price a little bit. You have to be accessible, but we started out premium. That felt right. We used premium inputs. And we didn't cheapen the product with added sugar or sulfites, which is very common to the category. And but pricing, it helped that I came from a finance background where I was covering food and beverage companies that happened to be public, where I understood all the layers of cost and markup along the way that it would take for the original manufacturer would need to think about prior to a customer pulling off shelf at $5.99, working backwards to ensure that I had built in enough cushion so that I could have, an appropriate margin, a distributor could, a retailer could, and the customer could have an awesome experience at an accessible price.
Recently, and I'd love to know how the manufacturing process maybe changed or if it didn't change from it, but I know recently you purchased a manufacturing facility as you've grown, as you've scaled, and I think that's pretty fascinating because for a lot of food and beverage brands that I talk to, the idea of vertically integrating at all sounds not interesting at all. Sounds totally insane. Sounds way too complex. Hey, Mike, my business is already so complex as it is. Why do I want to add manufacturing to it? Why did you want to maybe vertically integrate or also own some of the manufacturing from it? What are maybe some of the other gains as well you were able to get from manufacturing products?
So at a starting point, when everyone else is saying, this is crazy, you shouldn't do it, I get excited. I think doing the hard things creates moat and competitive advantage. Otherwise, everyone would be doing it. It's going to certainly add complexity to the journey, but if it makes sense, and I've seen enough evidence, going in, and this was an opportunity that was not necessarily something we were pursuing, but just started to make sense as our business evolved. We would do it 100 times over. It has been such a huge unlock for us. I'm happy to share, how that's been playing out. But we love to do the hard things. And so not only did we acquire a great business, they happen to make granola. They're based out of New England, large private label business, very efficient manufacturer, and very modern, sophisticated equipment. But we also opened up a warehouse so we could maximize the production footage of the facility. They had some outbound warehouse space that was half the production floor we moved the half of that to an entirely new facility that we greenfielded or built out ourselves. And those were two really hard things at the same time. So we are okay sort of penalizing the profitability of the firm, to invest in very high return projects that will take time. We have time. And I think most entrepreneurs maybe lack patience. They may have that for a reason. They may have investors who require a certain speed. But to do things right, everything takes time. That's my view, at least. And we're fortunate to have the kind of investors who saw doing the hard things as an opportunity to, slow down to go fast and build some competitive advantages in a highly commoditized category.
So can you talk to me a little bit about the competitive advantages when it comes to Rind specifically, and how that was a game changer on the manufacturing side for Rind?
Sure. So the most obvious was margin. So I'll come back to that. Savings. You were taking tolling that was perhaps 30 to 40 cents per unit to get product into a bag, and when you labor allocate that with your own team, you can do it for a nickel, right? So there's a huge pickup in the tolling and the co-manufacturing element of the supply chain that you've acquired. And the other would be on freight and fulfillment that you now have in-house versus costs to a 3PL, which can really add up. So we were able to capture, and it's ongoing, but between 15 and 20 points of margin points. So it's been massive. And that's without owning dehydration. That's just owning what I would call kind of the middle layer of the supply chain. But the biggest opportunity that it has afforded us is on the innovation front. And what Rind had been up to, 4 years in, prior to vertically integrating, we had built great relationships at the B2B level with the key accounts that matter: Walmart, Target, Kroger, Costco, some key private label customers as well. And that was our superpower prior to manufacturing. And we loved having conversations with buyers where they would say, this is what we're thinking. We love your products, but can you make something unique to us? Can we co-develop something? Or this is what we're hearing from our customers. And we'd get that and say, we absolutely want to do that. It's going to take a year, right? We'd have to, identify a product formulation, a developer, a benchtop samples, et cetera. We can do that in weeks now in our own facility. We can iterate really fast and get samples that would have taken months to a Walmart or, a club buyer. And they say, we want to tweak this or make it saltier, less sweet. I want to try it with this fruit, that fruit. We love that ability. You have to have both sides. You have to start having built really good distribution and relationships that you can leg into those conversations and say, we have all these capabilities now that we own manufacturing. Let's work together on products that are unique to you.
That's amazing. So it really has sped up innovation. You can even do exclusives, for example, for example, products at different retailers and in a lot less time. Obviously, from a margin standpoint, that's the obvious part, but 20 points, that's massive. And how do you find balancing? Because you're not just a manufacturer, obviously, for Rind, you're also a manufacturer for a private label business. I'd imagine also with that increased warehousing facility, you can also manufacture other brands too. How do you think about that side of the business where you're actually managing other brands versus Rind and making sure that Rind is growing great, and also that you have obviously enough warehousing space or rather manufacturing space for Rind, but also be able to assist other brands and as well as your own private label brand?
It's funny. That is the key question. That has the evolution of the business. And, it wasn't in the cards that we were going to vertically integrate, at the beginning of 2023. And now that we have it, we can't think of a world before then. And it's created all these inbound opportunities besides just making our own product. And what we recognized was, being an asset light brand had its advantages in speed to market early on. But going forward, we believe, because we see it in our own business, that there is not enough margin to truly be a highly cash flow generative business with an innovation core while being outsourced to and beholden to third parties, whether it's a co-man or whether it's 3PLs. That's how our product is, at least. We don't have a competitive advantage at the farm or ag level. We're not growers, we're not dehydrators. So to own our destiny, it required a big, bold move like this acquisition. And, what's great about that is we now think of the business as sort of a pyramid. Our brand is at the North Star. It's the top of the pyramid. We've built tremendous, we believe, equity in the fruit snack space with Rind, and we're going to continue to build incredible value and excitement with lines of products under the Rind brand. But we get to do that in a self-sufficient way by virtue of a healthy private label business with incredible contribution margin and low risk, with select contract manufacturing where we work with, like you're describing, brands that we know and trust, which is a really cool phenomenon where we can't think of another brand that's operating in the trenches like all our fellow CPGers, but also has a manufacturing business that could be a partner to them. So there's a new layer of trust where someone may say, we're about to sign with this co-man or renew here, but I saw you announce this news and we'd love to see if there's a fit. And then we get to talking and it's, we are living the same journey. And so we are selectively onboarding some very high quality brands that you and your listeners would know and recognize on shelf, and are leaning into opportunities. We're not going to just take any business that we view as non-competitive to Rind, where we still have capacity within our current shift structure, and where it makes a lot of sense to, leverage our capacity, ramp up utilization, and do it in a way that's partnership driven. So we love this. Some of these products will start to say powered by Rind on their branded products, which we think is going to be a really cool calling card for other packaged snacks, that might want to reach out to us and, work more with an operator than with a third-party co-man.
I know you said this earlier, but this is why also it's really important if you do end up raising capital, who you're raising from, because I think when you raise from traditional VC CPG investors, that's the goal. Maybe it's one shoulder over and looking what the strategics are doing, and seeing how you can get a strategic exit, and maybe you have a couple hero products and that can kind of drive you there. But if you have investors that actually might not worry as much about, or might not be interested in, for example, in a strategic exit, but actually building an independent brand on its own and having those dividends, then that gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of what you can operate.
There's lots of ways to win, right? I don't think no business model is linear, and we may not have pursued something like this if we were making a product that had 65-70% product margin. Maybe it was a condiment, maybe it was a seasoning, maybe it was a sauce. Fruit is expensive, and this is what we needed to do in our particular case. And it was the right move. We actually think we de-risked a lot by doing this. We think it's not a good strategy to have only one set of exit outcomes where you're just building your business to sell to big CPG. There's a lot that is out of your control in that. And maybe you'll catch lightning in a bottle and you'll have a product with insane margins that turns 50 units per store per week. If you do, God bless. Then you shouldn't, have any diversity. You should just be printing and creating line extensions off of that golden goose. I have yet to meet an entrepreneur who has had that road be so well paved.
It's a great point. My final question to you, Matt, is what would you value more? $100 of inventory, of rind, or $100 of cash?
I would value my own inventory over the cash because I feel like we can do so much with our inventory now that we're a manufacturer, whether it's on the cost side, whether it's on proprietary blend that can be highly accretive and hard to replicate, so it can create some sort of a secret sauce. It's almost like the $100 bet on the product that we know best, whether it's on the cost side or inventory value, I think is worth more than $100 based on sort of our inside knowledge of how to manufacture more efficiently and create really compelling new products.
Love it. Matt, thanks again so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This is so much fun.
Always enjoy it, Mike. Thanks.
And there you have it. It was a pleasure chatting with Matt. Matt, thanks again so much for your time. If you're enjoying this show, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening on. And also check out our events at manufacturer.com/events. We love bringing the community together. Thanks for listening.